All right, when did Paul go to Arabia? So let me set this up. In Galatians 1, Paul says that after meeting Jesus on the road to Damascus, he didn't go to Jerusalem straight away. Instead, he went to Arabia and then came back to Damascus, and only 3 years later went up to Jerusalem. But when we turn to Acts, things look a little bit different. The first time we meet Paul, then called Saul, is at the end of Acts 7, when Stephen is stoned. So Luke tells us that Saul was watching over the coats of the men who were accusing Stephen. So our first real look at Paul then comes in Acts 9. On the road to Damascus, he encounters Jesus. He goes straight into the city of Damascus, to the house of a man named Judas. Paul is blind. He's praying, and Ananias comes to him, lays his hands on him, and something like scales fall from Paul's eyes. Paul's then baptized, and right away, Paul begins to proclaim Jesus in the synagogues of Damascus. And then Luke says, after many days had gone by, some of the Jews began to conspire or plot to kill Paul. And so they're watching the city gate to see when Paul leaves, but Paul is lowered in a basket through an opening in the city wall, and he escapes at night and heads to Jerusalem. All right, so to be clear, in Galatians then, Paul goes from Damascus to Arabia, back to Damascus, and then it's 3 years before Paul finally goes up to Jerusalem. But in Acts, Paul seems to go straight from Damascus to Jerusalem. So then where does Arabia fit into the Acts account? So the most likely answer is that it happened during that stretch that Luke refers to as after many days. So somewhere between Paul preaching in the synagogues and the plot against his life, Paul must have gone away to Arabia and then returned to Damascus. And that whole period seems to cover those 3 years he mentions in Galatians before he goes up to Jerusalem. So when does Paul go to Arabia in Acts? Most likely right there in Acts 9:23, tucked inside or either just before or just after those many days.